I don't know how to feel about game subscriptions. Because a few weeks ago I played Avowed, a game that I had no intention of playing. Avowed is the newest game by Obsidian Entertainment, the people behind just a whole bunch of stuff. And of that bunch, I've played exactly this. Not because I have anything against Obsidian, I just have never been that into classic Western RPGs. And considering that, as well as the fact that Avowed released to fine reception, like good enough, but not anything to blow me away, the chances of me playing this game under normal circumstances would be pretty damn low, especially for launch at that price tag. But this wasn't normal circumstances, because Obsidian is Xbox, and Xbox is Game Pass, and I like Game Pass, and I have Game Pass. So I was able to play Avowed right away and enjoy its beauty and splendor for like 3 hours before I sort of forgot about it and haven't touched it since. And I wanted to start this video off talking about my experience with Avowed because I feel like it's the game that really got me thinking about subscription services and the full extent to which I interact with them. The advent of game subscriptions has definitely opened a lot of doors for me as a player, but it's also limited how much I connect with what I'm playing and how long I'm willing to give these games a chance before I move on. And there are also much more serious ramifications to these services that are either coming in the next few years or have already happened, sometimes without us noticing, which makes them really important to talk about because at the same time, these services are so useful, it's hard not to recommend them. Even just last week, a buddy of mine was asking for game recommendations and I told him to get PlayStation Plus and he got it and then said he has no need to buy anything else now. And personally, over the course of just 5 months, I will have played or am planning on playing through Game Pass alone Indiana Jones, Ninja Gaiden 2 Black, Avowed, South of Midnight, Doom of the Dark Ages, and Clair Obscur Expedition 33 all at launch. So what comes out to like $350 individually, I'm gonna be paying about $100 for, and just think about the sheer freedom that $250 buys me. 5,000 5-cent candies from 7-Eleven. For the most part, the savings here are so good that it's really hard to look past them. I mean, there's a reason that one of these services has been dubbed by the industry as the best deal in gaming. But if you can look past them, you'll realize just how much the industry has shifted beneath our feet in what feels like just a few short years. So what I want to do today is talk about game subscriptions. Not just pitting them against each other individually and seeing where they falter, although I'm going to be doing that as well, but also talking about why they become so essential and how they're shaping the future of the games industry for better and for worse. And the best way for us to do that is to ask 4 main questions. How did we get here? Where are we now? Where are we going? And how did that guy get so well rested? This video is sponsored by Manta Sleep. Have you ever been so well rested, your coffee had you in the morning? Manta Sleep. Have you ever been so well rested, your bed had bags under its eyes? Manta Sleep. Well, now you can be with Manta Sleep masks. Get it 10% off. Manta Sleep masks have a premium feel and come with an easy, snappy, lightweight strap for easy adjustability. I'm telling you, you can get 10% off using the link in my description. Pick from a range of options like the Silk Mask, the Pro Mask, and even the Sound Mask with built-in headphones. Swap your eye cups for cool and heated options, or ones designed for all you side sleepers out there. Sleep on your side. Use code ASAD or click the link in the description for 10% off your Manta Sleep purchase. Thanks for sponsoring the video. I think a lot of people are under the impression that game subscription services are in their infancy right now, and in a way they kind of are because they haven't hit the stability in terms of both what they offer and their actual subscriber numbers. But in terms of how long companies have been trying to make massive game libraries under one monthly price a thing, it's kind of like VR, where it goes back a lot further than you might think, but has only now become remotely viable and commercially successful. So to really understand how these services evolved and where we're at right now, we're gonna have to do a classic YouTube here and go all the way back to the beginning. 1981 to 1996, we see a bunch of early attempts to create game subscription services, even streaming services, despite still being on dial-up internet. Some of them let you download games from a special phone line, others connected directly to cable TV with a special wire, but the thing they all had in common was that they were all stupidly expensive and barely worked. 2002 to 2009, we start seeing the proper introduction of paid online multiplayer with Xbox Live, and we also see the first major attempt to create a service like what Game Pass would eventually become in GameTap by Turner. It featured between 300 to 1,000 games over the course of its life cycle and included exclusive games and even TV shows. 2010, we start seeing the first iteration of PlayStation Plus, a paid monthly service that gave you exclusive discounts on the PlayStation Store and a few games for free every month. 2013, Xbox announces that Xbox Live will now also feature free games, because it was looking kinda awkward that they had you still paying for online while PlayStation's paid service gave you a collection of new games every month and their online was absolutely free. 2014, PlayStation announces that online will no longer be free and requires a PlayStation Plus subscription. They also launched PlayStation Now, an exclusive cloud-based game service for older titles that allowed you to play them at roughly 6 pixels per cubic meter. 2015, EA launches their service EA Play, Nvidia puts its cloud-based streaming service for PC, GeForce Now, into beta, and also GameTap dies. 2017, PlayStation Now is no longer just cloud streaming and adds downloadable PS4 and PS2 games, and also, big news, Xbox Game Pass officially launches with over 100 games, although it doesn't have its signature Day 1 exclusives just yet. 2018, Game Pass announces Day 1 exclusives. Also, Nintendo decides it's going to do paid online, but poorly and old. 2019, Ubisoft Plus launches and Google Stadia launches, so this was a big year for people who hate themselves. 2020, everyone winds up at home this year, and in a perfect storm moment, we simultaneously get some of the most significant jumps in the game subscription space. Nvidia moves their cloud service out of beta, Amazon moves their cloud service, Amazon Luna, into beta. They also start Prime Gaming, which includes PC games in your Amazon subscription, and most importantly, Xbox not only starts their streaming efforts with xCloud, but they also launched Game Pass on PC and Game Pass Ultimate, which gave you access to Game Pass across both console and PC, as well as access to EA Play games, really marking the moment that they decided to shift gears entirely and go all in on this service. 2021, Netflix starts their mobile gaming service, Netflix Games. 2022, PlayStation wakes up and realizes that in the last 5 years, everyone else has completely leapfrogged them, so they rebrand PlayStation Plus to essentially absorb PlayStation Now, and finally assemble a real competitor to Game Pass, which included cloud streaming and a massive list of downloadable games under one subscription. And then the last 2-3 years across all of these services, it's mainly just been small changes to prices, perks, and marketing. Now you might be wondering why we had to go through all of that just to set up the rest of this discussion. Okay, but seriously, I do think it was important to go through that timeline a little to get a bit of extra context. First of all, to the fact that people have been trying to make game subscription services a thing since the 1980s, with a bit of an uptick in the mid-2000s and an even bigger uptick around 2015, so it's been a while now, and we've seen at least to some degree what works and what doesn't. And second, to the fact that PlayStation and Xbox have kind of been at the heart of this conversation ever since it became a sustainable business model. Game Pass and this iteration of PlayStation Plus haven't just popped up recently out of nowhere. There have been slow, incremental changes over the last 2 decades to effectively transform a paid service for online multiplayer into something with a few extra perks and giveaways, into an entire suite of games for one monthly fee. And it is a little bit surprising that they've managed to remain the 2 leaders in this new era of subscription services, because typically when we talk about major shifts in media distribution, the old guard tends to get washed away due to their reliance on antiquated tech or outdated delivery systems, Blockbuster being the most apt comparison. But of course the difference here is that Sony and Microsoft have a much more active role in the means of production in gaming. They're the main reason that most games out there are, usable. Blockbuster was a middleman, but Xbox and PlayStation, along with Nintendo of course, are the games industry. Their existing ecosystems provided an easy jumping on point for players, and now their long-term relationships have helped them compile the 2 most enticing and comprehensive games catalogs of the current subscription era. So I guess the next thing we have to do is talk about these 2. What are they offering, and what are they sort of struggling with? As of today, there are 3 different membership types available for Xbox Game Pass on console: Core, Standard, and Ultimate. Core is the cheapest option at $10 a month and includes online multiplayer and a small selection of games, right now 47 of them. Standard is $5 more a month and adds about 300 more titles, and Ultimate gives you everything: a full library of nearly 500 games, including ones from EA Play, cloud streaming, and cross-functionality with PC, all for a total of $20 a month. There's also a PC-only option. It comes in at $12 a month, and it gives you access to all of the Game Pass games compatible with PC, which is 442, so most of them. Let's start off with the pros and get to the cons after, and a fair warning, for the next couple of minutes, I'm gonna sound like an undercover Microsoft executive, because I really do have a lot of good things to say about Game Pass. And really, it's hard for anybody to say, at least on the surface, that this isn't a good value proposition, especially the $20 a month Ultimate tier, which gives you access to all of the perks. That price tag is equivalent to 3 new AAA games a year, and as an active player, each year I've had the service, I've played at least 3 new AAA games on Game Pass, on top of scrounging through older titles and playing a bunch of indies. As a newer player, you get an even better deal, with access to almost 500 games here, and a lot of these are must-play titles. If you look through the library right now, it has the Ninja Gaiden series, Arkham Knight, Celeste, Dead Cells, Dead Space, Deep Rock Galactic, the Dishonored franchise, Diablo 4, the Doom games, Dragon Age, Fallout, Far Cry, Gears of War, Hellblade, Hollow Knight, Indiana Jones, It Takes Two, Inside, Lies of P, Mass Effect, Mirror's Edge, Monster Hunter Rise, My Friend Peppa Pig, Ori, Persona 3 Reload, Prey, Resident Evil, Tomb Raider, Sifu, Star Wars Jedi, The Outer Worlds, Titanfall 2, Wasteland, Wolfenstein, and a bunch of Yakuza games. Plus a ton of smaller titles that I love, like Carry On, Inscription, Neon White, Nine Souls, and Solar Ash, and a few games that I talked about last month, like Grease, Spiritfarer, and Limbo. That is an absolutely all-star cast, and it brings me to my first pro: consistency. Game Pass games are often very good, and at the very least, real competent video games, not like shovelware or something. If a game is on Game Pass, then there's probably an actual tangible audience for it. This number of 500 games is not as inflated as some other services. The second pro has got to be the day one releases, which extend past Xbox exclusives and into some third-party deals like Lies of P, and even indies like Hollow Knight Silksong. Yeah, I don't know if you guys remember this, but when that game comes out, it's supposed to be coming day one to Game Pass, assuming Game Pass still exists when Silksong comes out, which I'm not entirely sure about, because I think the Heat Death of the Universe will come out before Silksong does. If I had to guess, I'd say I spend around 80% of my time with Game Pass on new content that released at launch, and maybe that's just me, maybe other people use it differently, but it's probably my favorite thing about the service. And the only reason I say probably is because the other big thing that Game Pass has going for it is its availability on PC. This isn't something that's completely native to Xbox, because a few other services have cross-functionality between console and PC, but nothing with even remotely the kind of library that Xbox has, and most notably, not PlayStation. I personally spend most of my time with Game Pass on PC. My very first suggestion to any friends who want to get into gaming on PC is to try Game Pass. PC gaming is on the rise in general, and Xbox's lead here is only going to get more significant when PC handhelds like the Steam Deck get native support for Game Pass, something that both Microsoft and Valve have said they want to work on. That ecosystem would honestly be incredible. In theory, I'd be able to play on my computer, resume that progress on my Steam Deck on like a plane to visit my parents, and then continue on my Xbox at their place. The only difference is that it'll look marginally worse, and the room will smell vaguely of chicken tikka masala. Xbox clearly knows that this is their best chance at still being a real gaming company after their console efforts sort of fizzled out over the last decade, so they've really gone all in on this multi-platform subscription model, and I honestly think it's a really smart move. That all said, I still have some issues with Game Pass. The first is the way that they've continuously restructured their offerings to make Game Pass Ultimate the only option worth buying for most people. For a really long time, you weren't able to get Xbox Live, the service that actually let you play games online on your Xbox, without the Ultimate subscription, and once they changed that to get rid of Xbox Live and fold it into Game Pass, they immediately took away day one releases from lower console tiers. That's on top of putting EA Play games exclusively on Ultimate, only giving you access to their cloud streaming with Ultimate, and only giving you support on both console and PC with Ultimate, not to mention heavily restricting the significance of deals and discounts that come with Game Pass on the lower tiers. Look, I get that you have to make higher tiers more appealing, but usually the differences are supposed to be like convenience, number of screens, supplementary features. In this case, you get those differences, but also your biggest selling points, like the stuff that you always talk about and market, are only available on Game Pass Ultimate, which feels a little bit misleading. I also feel like it's hard to ignore that Xbox console players, who have likely invested the most in Xbox as a platform, are the ones who are kind of getting railroaded with some of these changes. And I don't even mean in the sense that Xbox is probably going console-less soon. I'm talking about how they're treating people on console currently compared to how they're treating everyone else. Because despite the PC-only plan being $3 a month cheaper than the highest console-only plan, it includes EA Play and actually gives you access to day one games just like Ultimate, while the standard console tier gets neither of those things. If we want to have a discussion on how Xbox is treating their most loyal customer base, the fact that the $15 console-only tier misses out on the best feature of the service while the $12 PC tier doesn't feels like a pretty good encapsulation of how strange that relationship is right now. And the last thing I want to note here is something that we're going to get a little bit more into later, but Xbox has already shown their hand in how they're shifting their entire business model away from permanence and actually owning your games. Game Pass Core is an explicit rebrand of what was Xbox Live Gold, and with it, Xbox has abandoned the long-standing tradition of giving out 3 to 4 permanently owned games for free every month in favor of what's essentially just a super light version of Game Pass that gives players 25 to 50 games immediately. It seems like an upgrade at first glance, but then you do the math and realize that the old system would have given you that number of games over the course of a year and a half anyways, and the kicker is that those games couldn't actually be taken away from you because of expired licensing or something. As long as you had the service, you had those games, but now you've lost that control. Overall, I'm still a fan of what Game Pass is doing, and I've played a lot of really great games through it. I like it a lot, but there are definitely some problems, especially with pricing and customer loyalty, that feel like they could become bigger problems in the future. Still, it's clear at this point that Game Pass is the front runner for game subscriptions, and its closest competition is still miles behind. What started out as 2 separate services in PlayStation Plus and PlayStation Now have now become merged under a single PlayStation Plus banner that has 3 tiers: Essential, Extra, and Premium. They're all extremely similar to what Game Pass is offering, with the major differences being that Sony is keeping the monthly free games model for now. They get Ubisoft games instead of EA ones, and their top tier is PlayStation only, doesn't have launch day exclusives, and offers a bunch of game demos for stuff that's not on the service. Now, because PlayStation's kind of coming in at the back foot over here, I think it makes more sense to talk about its shortcomings first and then move on to the stuff that I really do like about PlayStation Plus. And the first thing has to be its lack of day one releases apart from indie titles. I feel like there's just no way to talk about this when Game Pass exists, and so much of that service's value, to me at least, is in newly released games. PlayStation exclusives do typically end up on the service after about 1 to 2 years, and I understand why Sony doesn't want to put its massive blockbusters on the service until after they've exited the peak sales window, considering how successful they are. But if we're talking specifically about how the services themselves stack up against each other, this is maybe the biggest difference between the two. Same thing goes for its lack of PC support. Again, I get it. Microsoft is a computer software company that's been making their games simultaneously on PC for a while now. Porting is an issue. Your console is going very strong. I understand why it's not here, but it does suck not having it on the service. But the one thing I feel like has no excuses is the fact that the vetting process to get onto the games catalog is, let's say, not as thorough as the one to get onto Game Pass. Some of this stuff shouldn't have even made it onto the storefront itself, much less be advertised under the 600 incredible games you get access to. Although in fairness, I guess that does sound better than about 100 incredible games and then roughly 500 vehicle simulators and 1 bee simulator. What is Bus Simulator 21? Are there 20 other bus simulators? The lack of new releases and quality control is a big reason why, again, despite being a primarily PlayStation player, I haven't really gone through the games catalog much since it got introduced. Honestly, most of the time, I forget I even have it. It's like my Amazon Prime Video membership. I kind of forget about it until Invincible comes out, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I can use Amazon for things besides buying pants that exclusively rip in the crotch area. And with this little trifecta of negatives, I gotta say, I think it's pretty telling that the 3 things PlayStation is struggling with the most are the exact 3 things that make Game Pass so great. Also, just as a more general note, I don't think it helps that Sony decided to keep the PlayStation Plus branding here, because At this point, most people associate that with a small perk and giveaway service, not a straight up Game Pass competitor. Actually, for a long time, Sony's kinda gotten away with naming services, promotions, and showcases like a goddamn crackhead, because the products are so good, it usually doesn't matter. But having all these different promos and nonsensical naming systems has definitely caused damage to the basic understanding of what PlayStation Plus is even supposed to be. The service is suffering from a branding problem more than anything, and it might take itself a while to dig out of that particular hole. But there are also a few things that I really like about PlayStation Plus. For one, the games catalog might be a little bit top heavy, but call it my girl, cause that top is incredible. It's just so out of left field. What did I say? Somebody told me the other day that my channel reminded them of Game Maker's Toolkit. Dude, imagine Mark Brown making that joke. Anyways, the point I was trying to make was that the best games on here are undeniably great. I mean, I might be a little bit biased, but I feel like having Sony exclusives puts the upper echelon of this service a lot higher than Game Passes. You got stuff like Bloodborne, Ghost of Tsushima, the God of War games, including Ragnarok, the Uncharted games, the Last of Us games, and a ton more. It also has a good chunk of games that overlap with that list from earlier, and more third-party stuff like Ghost Runner, Sonic Frontiers, and Like a Dragon Ishin, plus all those Ubisoft games, so the problem mainly shows up in that AA indie space where Sony's really juicing up those numbers. Also, I feel like the pricing options here are a little bit more flexible and honestly more fair than Game Passes. PS Plus Essential and Extra compare almost exactly to Game Pass Core and Standard. None of these have PC access, none of these have day one releases, and they're all offered at the same monthly price comparatively. But in my opinion, there are better games at the top here, and PlayStation offers yearly subscriptions unlike Xbox, which can save you a nice chunk of change. The two's premium tiers, on the other hand, do have a decent discrepancy in what they offer, but that's also reflected in the lower price for PlayStation Plus, which is just a few dollars less a month, but for yearly subscriptions, it slashes $80 to $140 off what Xbox is asking for. That's not nothing. And the last big thing PlayStation Plus has going for it is actually a lot of things wrapped into one. It's got better secondary perks and features than Game Pass, in my opinion. You know, the stuff that's not the core appeal of the service, but definitely sweetens the deal a little bit. In my experience, PlayStation Plus discounts on games are a lot better than over on Xbox. According to Digital Foundry, they have a leg up when it comes to cloud streaming. Game trials allow you to play the first few hours of games that aren't entirely on the service, and not just any games, but some of the most well-reviewed titles of the last couple of years in Alan Wake 2, Black Myth Wukong, Baldur's Gate 3, Cyberpunk, and Metaphor ReFantazio. And they've also made a play in the companion cloud streaming space with the PlayStation Portal, which, you know, I wish was something that let you play games locally, but for what it is, it's gotten a lot of positive buzz. I really do feel like PlayStation Plus has a lot of things going for it, but they feel like they have one foot in the door here, probably because they've managed to do a lot better with the traditional method of selling console games than Xbox has. And if they manage to remain successful in that market, I mean, more power to them. I kind of want it to happen. I don't necessarily want a full push towards subscription-only gaming, but by all indications, the traditional way of making and selling games is about to hit a breaking point, even for Sony. So it'll be interesting to see when, if ever, they do commit to truly coming for that number one spot. And you know what? While we're here, we might as well talk about what everyone else is doing. EA Play kind of confuses me because on one hand it's a reasonably good service in theory. I know a lot of people like to hate on EA, but they have a pretty stellar back catalog and have had a bit of a resurgence recently. Plus, the Pro subscription gives you games a few days early, which is like a stupid new trend that I hate, but technically you're getting something that other people don't, so I guess that's nice. But also, its Pro tier is basically the same price as Game Pass Ultimate or PlayStation Plus Premium, which is really weird to see side by side. For $17 a month, I can get access to EA Play, and for $20 a month, I can get access to EA Play and literally the entire rest of Game Pass across multiple devices. At that point, the only reason to get this is if you only have a PlayStation, and the weirdest part is PlayStation is stuck with the least amount of total games from EA Play. Also, the non-pro subscription is just like a trial system. Like, it's a lot cheaper, but you only get access to select games and for a total of 10 hours each. Honestly, I have no idea how the service has even been going on for 10 years now. At least with its current pricing, I can't see how this is a good deal for anyone. Ubisoft Plus has a lot of the same problems as EA Play, but is, at least in my opinion, a little bit more of a fair shake for both of its tiers. Don't get me wrong, it is ridiculous how close the pricing options are to getting to the likes of the big boys, when the quality of games and the service here is so much lower. But the lower tier actually does give you access to full games, not the entire catalog, but a decent enough chunk, and the higher tier gives you cloud streaming capabilities and better discounts on the storefront than EA did. I still wouldn't suggest it, considering the roughly $180 to $200 a year you'll be spending on this service. You could very easily buy all of the games you're eyeing from the service that you'll actually get to in a year, but I guess if you're a massive Ubisoft fan, you maybe end up grabbing this, for as long as Ubisoft is a real company, that is. To nobody's surprise, Nintendo is mainly off huffing paint thinner in an abandoned factory in Calabasas. Their prices are way lower than everyone else's, but they also have kind of a busted online experience, and their games catalog is just classic titles, which can obviously be really nice for some people, especially considering it is classic Nintendo games, but it also just can't be compared to what some of these other services are doing. I kind of view Switch Online as its own thing. It's not like a direct competitor to the rest of these, but it has its uses. I personally go without it, but for the right type of player, I know that the Switch can turn into a nice little classics machine. GeForce Now is a very different type of game subscription service that is definitely worth keeping an eye on as it keeps gaining steam. Unlike these other services, the subscription isn't a monthly fee that replaces buying games individually, it's a monthly fee that replaces buying a computer. It connects to most PC storefronts out there, including Steam, Ubisoft, EA, Epic, and Xbox, and allows you to access and play games you own from those stores through the cloud. So even if I had a rinky-dink piece of garbage laptop with the absolute bare minimum specs but decent Wi-Fi, I could buy and play a brand new game at basically the highest quality that device will let me. It seems like it runs great and is probably the best cloud option out there, and even though it comes with a heavy price tag for something that doesn't actually give you games, if you bought it at its most expensive option and the price stayed steady, it would take around 10 years of subscribing to the service before it cost as much as a full computer with the specs it promises. And you get to upgrade it in real time without any physical replacements or extra purchases. But of course, it is fully dependent on the quality of your Wi-Fi, and because it's meant to be a pretty smooth cloud-based system, it can't afford to have too many subscribers clogging up the traffic. So there are queue times, and pretty often they will literally run out of stock on subscriptions because letting anyone else in would impact the quality of the service. Actually, when I checked it out for this video, everything besides the super expensive day pass was completely sold out, which isn't great. Still, I think it's a pretty cool idea and will only get more interesting as cloud streaming improves. In terms of companies that have thrown their hat into the game subscription ring, I feel like Amazon is the one that's most confused on what exactly it wants to do. Besides Google, of course, but Stadia is not even around to make fun of anymore. Originally, they were going to build big in-house development projects and were going to be more ambitious with their gaming plays, but they clearly didn't realize how massive of an undertaking that would be and how cornered the market is. So now instead, they have Prime Gaming, which is a few free games included in your regular Amazon Prime subscription, and Amazon Luna, their cloud streaming offering that you buy separately for $10 a month. Can't be all that mad at Prime Gaming. I mean, it literally comes at no additional cost to a subscription that a ton of people already have, so this is just a nice bonus. And Luna feels kinda shaky. It's not nearly as comprehensive or high quality as GeForce, the games included here are kind of disappointing, and it also just doesn't feel like it's ingratiated into the PC ecosystem. I don't think they're really doing anything interesting here besides being Amazon. And Netflix Games is the last service I want to talk about here because it's the one that I'm most curious to see how it turns out. They're obviously a streaming giant, they seem like they showed a lot more patience and planning here than other outsiders like Amazon, and their main focus being mobile is, I think, the right decision here. They are moving a little bit into cloud streaming, but their main focus does seem to be on mobile games, whether original small-scale projects, stuff related to their shows and movies, or ports of a few amazing PC games. I mean, Death's Door is on here, Dead Cells, Hades, freaking GTA San Andreas is on this thing, and they all come at no additional cost to the regular Netflix subscription. The potential of this is pretty significant, and I really do think they're one of the bigger X factors in this space. So overall, We're all over the place here. Most of these subscriptions do have something to offer, a few at ludicrous prices, but others being integrated directly into existing subscriptions. But the biggest bottleneck across the board is access to mainstream games, which is why Sony and Microsoft are so ahead of everybody else. It's definitely going to be a few years, maybe even a decade before things stabilize a little bit more on all this, but at that point we might be dealing with a completely new games industry as a result of all these changes. So I think it's about time we got to maybe the most important question in all this. There are definitely a lot of good things that have come from the push towards game subscriptions. For starters, if you're somebody who typically plays a ton of games, you're probably spending a little bit less and playing a little bit more. If you're somebody who hasn't played a ton of games till now, besides a little bit of paradox of choice, this is one of the most welcoming moves the games industry has ever made. All of a sudden, you're getting access to so many beloved games, new and old, and in some cases don't even need to necessarily purchase new hardware to do so. That removes a massive barrier for entry. And one of my favorite things about all this is how easy it's becoming to access older games through downloads or cloud streaming. Game preservation has always been a huge problem, so the fact that I can go back and play Sly Cooper on my PS5 when I never even played or owned it originally is genuinely amazing. And then of course there's all the stuff that I mentioned in the last section, the potential to have cross saves across multiple platforms, getting access to demos, trying out games I maybe wouldn't have otherwise. All that stuff is great. But as much as I like where we are right now, and I love the money it saves me and the options it gives me, there's an element to this that feels a little bit sour. The first thing that really concerns me is how this new game subscription era is going to affect game development long term. The shift to streaming services and other media has created a lot of changes in how content is created. In music, you see longer, bloated albums with shorter songs to maximize streaming numbers, and for shows and movies, you see things being written specifically as second screen content because that's what the data shows is the most effective for binge watching. So undoubtedly, we're going to see something similar with games. We may start seeing a return to shorter games, which honestly, I wouldn't mind at all, and introductory hours would probably get you to the core gameplay loop faster, which also isn't inherently a bad thing. But you also probably start seeing a loss in complexity. Anything that requires heavy tutorialization just becomes much harder to justify in this new ecosystem. In a few years, I think we see a rise in episodic content, which personally isn't how I want to play games, but it maintains subscribers over a long period of time, shortens production cycles, and tightens up budgets, so it's all but inevitable. And even though it doesn't seem like it could get a lot worse than it is right now, we probably also see another sharp spike in microtransactions, especially for single-player games, since those purchases would actually go more directly to the developers and would also be an alternate solution to having ads in games. At their very best, these shifts help offset the astronomical amount of money that goes into making games, and also maybe offer a bit of stability to devs that are making deals with PlayStation and Xbox. But at their worst, they chop up our entertainment into smaller, dumber pieces, introduce more in-game purchases, and train content off of our worst habits as players. And it's not just the development side of the industry that changes drastically with this shift. It's going to start affecting players just as much as the people making games. I think the first thing that we can safely predict is that there's no way prices stay even remotely at this level for very long, with the lowest costing options being at $10 a month and the highest around $20. Like I said, Game Pass has already made the move to make their lower tiers next to obsolete since they don't come with the majority of the benefits you'd want, which is why you see over 80% of Game Pass subscribers opting for the ultimate subscription. So we're likely to see these $10 to $15 options get phased out or have everything shuffled around with price changes across the board. But obviously if you raise the price past a certain point, it no longer feels like a good deal. So in order to get away with those price hikes, the biggest thing companies want to build with these services is reliance. How can we make it so players feel like they need this service so that they don't ever want to leave even when the price starts creeping up? We've seen this happen with Netflix, obviously, coming in at a much better price than cable and eating a lot of the cost of operating something like this early on in order to build that reliance. And then eventually all of the things that made it so appealing to begin with start getting taken away. They hiked up the price, introduced ad tiers, they have ads when you pause what you're watching now, they got rid of password sharing, and somehow they don't lose their subscriber base because they became ubiquitous. And I actually think the games ecosystem is an even bigger hotbed for that kind of backhanded subscriber treatment because there's just a lot less true competition out there. No one even remotely has the first and third party relationships relationships to match Sony and Microsoft. And with that level of control over the market, it becomes even easier to position features in ways that seem like they benefit us, but are actually meant to build up that reliance. A perfect example is what I mentioned earlier with Game Pass rebranding Xbox Live to Game Pass Core. That's a decision that gives you less games in the long run, and you don't get to keep them, but because Game Pass is the best deal in gaming, those downsides went largely unnoticed.
Xbox Live Gold has been upgraded into the wonderful new Game Pass Core.
The loss of ownership and permanence is, in my opinion, the worst part about these services, because as easy as it is for me to say what I said earlier, which is that if I play the equivalent of 3 AAA games on Game Pass, I make my money back in a certain way, that's not technically true, because if I actually bought the games, I could resell them, I could give them to a friend, I could, play them at any point that I wanted to in the future. Here, I get none of those choices. It could just be taken away from me at any time. That's a real problem considering, on average, third-party games on PlayStation Plus and Xbox Game Pass only stay for about 6 to 12 months. And it becomes even more of a problem the more prevalent these services become and other forms of buying and interacting with games are lost. It really goes hand in hand with this massive push this generation into digital storefronts for games. Something that's existed for forever, but we're now being strong-armed into it. Consoles ship with no disc drive, you gotta buy special editions or separate attachments to even slide a PS4 disc that you literally own into a PS5. Physical releases of games, even AAA games, even collector's editions of AAA games are being shipped without an actual disc. You now have to interact predominantly with digital storefronts to get what you want, and those digital storefronts are now being converted into monthly subscriptions where you lose 100% of the personal control over products that you're actively paying money for. Last year, a Ubisoft executive made a statement about how gamers need to get comfortable with not owning their games, and I thought the public's response to that was pretty interesting. Everybody rushed in to dunk on him and the company because they assumed he said it in regards to what Ubisoft was trying to do specifically. They were trying to take away your rights to own games, but if you read this statement, he's talking about how the overall games industry is shifting towards a subscription-based future, and physical games are going to go the way of DVDs, where they're mainly just for hobbyists and collectors. And I think he's 100% right. He just said the quiet part out loud. That is very clearly the direction we're headed across the board, not just with Ubisoft, and we're already a decent part of the way there. Physical games media may die out even harder than DVDs actually, because new DVDs can still be played on old DVD players, but new games can't be played on old consoles. So the second that Sony says, you know what, forget attachable disc drives, the PS6 or PS7 has no disc drives at all, we never see physical editions of future games ever again. And the physical copies we have right now are relegated to old tech that will make them less accessible for future generations. It definitely adds a bit of a bittersweet asterisk to that whole games preservation case from earlier, because it is still true that this shift can be great for preservation. I mean, a little bit ago I saw the Resistance games are now on PlayStation Plus. Dude, I'm gonna tear through those things. I've been wanting an easy way to go back and play them. But the decision on whether I get to play those games a month, a year, 10 years from now is not in my hands the way that it would be if I just owned the game. If they take the servers down or decide to remove games or eras of games off the classics catalog, there is no easy, legal, or reliable way for the average person to access them anymore. And yeah, I'm aware we got a little bit depressing and dystopian here, so let me pull out of this nosedive real quick. Like I said, there are elements to these changes that will be beneficial to us in the long run. I know I haven't said the nicest things about traditional media streaming in this video, but I still use all these services. I still think they're convenient. I think it's better than buying them individually or cable TV. Streaming for music has made it a lot easier to find smaller artists. We've seen great streaming exclusive TV shows like Severance, Invincible, and BoJack Horseman, and it really can't be understated how nice it is to watch this content on a commute, on a plane with no Wi-Fi. That's amazing. I fully expect to see a similar increase in convenience for games going forward. Also, devs won't have to necessarily angle for a butt ton of pure sales. If they can generate good word of mouth and impact streaming numbers, they probably get paid. And of course, for players, you remove those hardware requirements, and that creates an entirely new way to interact with the medium. There are good things coming as a result of these changes, but there's also more than a few things worth preparing for in the long run. The future of games is changing for better and for worse, and if you think it's hitting a boiling point right now, it's really just getting started. This has been a cheery string of videos I've been putting out lately. Anyways, if you want to watch a video about those pre-2000s game subscription services that I mentioned earlier, I have a video on my second channel that's covering those, so go check that out. If you have any thoughts on this whole subscription mess, past, present, or future, I'd love to hear them in the comments. Join the Discord, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.